Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for watching my show. William Wallace for America. With me today in this episode is Jim Price with the Jim Price Show. Let me tell you something. If you haven't seen his show before, after tonight, you're going to want to hear and see him more because not only does he have some great information, he's passionate about our country, he's passionate about freedom, but most of all, he's passionate about the truth. And we're going to tell you how to get a little bit of all of it here in this show. Jim, thank you so much for being on with me today.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, William, for having me here. It's been great to be a friend of yours. We've been chatting it up for a couple of years now. Uh,
Absolutely.
so it's been a good run. And yeah, this old world we're living on, whether you want to call it heaven or hell or however you want to think of it, we have to have the keys and the tools to make ourselves successful going into the future. So that's what I try to base the things off of, being better than you were the day before, and knowing that I've been eaten up by the machine, and tell you guys it's not a lot of fun. So we can do a lot of things differently and treat each other better and make the world a better place.
That's right. Well, what's interesting is that, when I first started my show, I thought I was starting a show on conservatism and being a Republican and being on the right. But then after really getting deep into my show and meeting people like you and meeting more people at these conventions and hearing truth, you realize that it's not about being on the right. It's not about being a Republican. It's not about being conservative.
Mhm.
It's about finding the truth. And when you find the truth and you meet on the truth, you not only find the solutions, but you find more freedom.
Yeah.
And there's when you the truth, I know it's that you say the truth sets you free, but the truth really sets you free. So
Well, it can set you free, but the problem is what does that freedom cost you? The freedom costs you that little safety blanket that you're
that's
usually
right.
holding on to from the past, and that past is actually misinformation or actually lies or meant to misdirect you away from your power. Then it's going to hurt because you were so bound in and tied into that old system to go into understanding now. You may not like the messenger. The idea don't kill the messenger. Well, that's not. Yeah, that's actually very factual. A lot of people get very upset that you tell them that the world that they live on is being ruled by people that really don't give two craps and don't care whether you're around. You just kind of got out of control, and it's time to clip you back through some population control.
Yeah, and they don't care whether you're Republican or whether you're a Democrat. They don't care whether you're conservative. They only use those titles to corral us up into our own in the little bitty, I guess, in the little bitty groups that are easier to control. And that's where we lose our freedom and our liberty.
Well, it's called tribalism. We all get in our little tribes, and they're all little cool kids club. Now, tribalism doesn't mean that you stay in your tribe. That means you can flow around. So one day I'm over here, one day I'm over there, because we're talking about this. I'm with this group. Now we're talking about this. I'm with this group, and so it flows around. But then we end up doing is we create the circular firing squad. We end up shooting at each other when we know the enemy is outside of us.
That's exactly right. That's a great point. And like you said about traveling around into the different tribes, that's one thing I've liked about some of the circles that we're traveling in. And we're going to talk later about some of the events that we go to because I think they're a great way for people to not only get informed but get involved.
Mhm.
I meet more people there that we don't all agree on 100%. Because it's not a Republican thing like this last event that we went to in Springfield.
Mhm.
I mean, while people can say it's a Republican thing, and most people there are Republican, I find I've met people who aren't Republican, who are Democrats, who just we all kind of gravitate and find those things that we have in common. And the more we do that, the more I believe is how we protect our freedom in America.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about when we say, I call it this tribalism, but remember, there's a cool kids club that lives inside some of these tribes, and then those people feel that they're above other people, and so then you find out that maybe they're shills, maybe they're plants, maybe they're people that don't have that movement's best interest at heart. And the sad part of it is it takes some discernment. And as we go through our day, we have to be discerning. Like, so we go to the event in Springfield. Well, everybody's, you're like, well, yeah, like you said, oh, it's conservative. Well, if I fix the vote, if I make sure the value of your vote is so protected that you know exactly where your vote went and it counted exactly what it was supposed to, what does it matter what party you belong to or what ideology you belong to? If we're all securing your vote, then we all should be in the same boat together, saying, let's get this right, create transparency and an amount of trust that you just cannot break through. It's amazing that we don't want trust. We don't want transparency. No, we
Right.
leave it okay because our guy won. Now, here's the sad part of this. In 2016, our guy won, and I still railed against the machine. In 2018, we may have lost the House, but we kept the Senate, blah, blah, or we lost the House and kept the Senate, or about where it was. But the whole that was a whole thing, right? But the problem with that is again, I was still railing against the machine. I was saying, listen, we have a problem. And yet
Right.
the event itself should not create tribalism. It should create patriotism, God and country first, meaning that we want to make sure the country that is being taken care of under God's authority. But we don't want to hear that conversation because my guy won, your guy lost, you're sore losers, you're the problem, I'm not. And that then becomes an issue. The cool kids club are those that think that they're above us and who really are not the pedophiles, the lizard people, the elites, the whatever you want to call them, that are running the world. They think that they're running the world, but in reality, there is a dark hand that it's among us. But the sad part is we play into it by fighting with each other over stupid things that mean nothing.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I've seen so much of it, in the past, and like you said, they use those things, those narratives to corral us up. And I do believe, and you hit the nail on the head, that there is I say a sense of evil. There is an evil in this world that has taken control and has used a lot of key people in our society, that perpetuate the narratives, that not only keep us corralled and keep us divided, but keeps evil in control,
Yeah.
in our world. And the minute we get a grasp on that is the best way out of it.
Right. Well, again, you've got to know where your enemy is, and your enemy is outside of you, but it's also inside of us. And the sad part of it is we can go biblically to the scriptures and say, listen, the heart of a man is exceedingly wicked. Who shall know it? And then we understand those words. We understand that we have to embrace the suck about who we are. We know we have a sinful heart. We have a sinful nature. We know we have a credibility problem, and yet we want to make sure that we're being the best we can every day, right? So when we work inside of here, we work on us. A lot of times we get this taken care of and we embrace the idea that we know that we have these evil tendencies, that we got to fight against those and really work to find better patterns. We know that when we fix this in here, a lot of this stuff outside of us ends up taking care of itself as well, because we're working on others, or not working on others, but helping others and helping outside of ourselves. And then the world becomes a better place because we are doing more for those people.
What made you what was your trigger that made you start your show? What made you what set fire on your passion to start your show, to be able to talk about the truth?
Well, for me, there was throughout my life, I always had a kind of a little bit of a distaste for big government, a lot of government. I saw the fallacies in the system after I went through a lot of things as a child. So I had a little bit of a hesitation, and a good discernment in my heart to understand that maybe there's things that aren't always, we don't always trust the authority, because sometimes authority can be abusive. And I was a DoD contractor for almost 18 years. I spent almost 2 decades of my life as a private contractor for the Department of Defense, doing high security design builds, designing, building, and training the military on their command centers, on their the military installation buildings, different things. I've seen the nuclear installation where we actually store the nuclear weapon, the warheads. I've actually been in the stealth bomber. I've done all these things. And so as I was going through that, I was raising my kids. I was a single dad. And I was doing my part, and I thought, I love my country. I think it's great. I think we should be we should participate more in all these things. And I do have a sneeze coming on, so if I sneeze,
I'll have a God bless you ready. I have a God bless you ready.
Now that I said something, it ran away. But as I was going through life, my son, he graduates in 2013, and he's already 18 years old. He graduated in May, but his birthday's in March. So he's 18. He can do what he wants. He has his own money, has his own job and things of that nature. So he's like, hey, Dad, Mom, I want to get a tattoo for my graduation gift or whatever. Mom will pay for half. And I was like, whatever, man. I'm not paying for the Kool-Aid man on your leg or something.
Right.
I'm not, a unicorn or something weird. I'm like something funny or cliche. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I was like, I said, all right, I'll call my buddy. I said, hey, Juan, he owns this tattoo shop, Sailor Jerry's. I said, hey, Juan, you got a time slot for my son. And tattoo shops are not available ever. And I was kind of hoping like, yeah, no, dude, you got 2 weeks out. And he's like, no, bring him down. We'll do it right now. I'm like, All right. So it's like, all right, jump in the truck. Let's go, guys. So we went down there. My ex-wife at the time, and she's still my ex-wife now, thank God. So we go down to the tattoo shop, and we're sitting there, and I'm eating my bottom lip off on my face, and I'm just not wanting to be in there with her, and I'm waiting for him to come out with the Kool-Aid Man or something weird. And he's like, "All right, Dad, come here and take a look at this." And I'm like, it's like I'm like late walking to my own execution. I'm just not going
Yeah.
to be a part of it. And I turn around, I go back there, open the curtain, and go back, and he's got on his shoulder, up here on his chest, from collarbone to collarbone. He says, "Don't tread on me." I said, "I'll pay for the whole damn thing." And, somewhere along the line, I already had a God and country, don't tread on me government effect, but I was a DOD contractor. So, I had the short haircut, my hair, your hair. we both had the same haircut. Obviously, I have a little more hair on top, but
Well, I was trying to pull some out because I wanted to, when people see the video, we have kind of at least in the same length going on, but
yeah.
it just doesn't work that way. I got to pull my
Those
comb
braids
over.
out. Let the braids out in the back there.
Yeah, right.
Let it go.
I got to take the wrap around from the behind, and
Yeah. So as I was, I was a clean cut guy, maybe got a speeding ticket every couple of years, nothing big. My security clearance was very, very, very sensitive because I was the guy that knew how to keep their secret. I was the guy who built those infrastructures. I built the ground penetrating radar underneath these buildings because we knew that other countries tunnel under our country. We know that they come in proximity of our bases. So this is a real thing.
really, I had no idea. Are you serious?
Yeah, absolutely. I was doing this 15 years ago. I was putting in ground penetrating radar in 15 years ago. So this is nothing new. This is not something that we just started. This was a pre-existing measurement that's required in sensitive buildings that I had to make sure and install. I had to integrate into the building and install it so that our military can know what was underneath their buildings. And so that's what I was doing. And then a buddy of mine said, "Hey, why don't you run for state senate?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll do it." And he goes, "Are you sure?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Well," I said, "Where do I go?" He goes, "Well, you go down, you can file down at the courthouse, or you go up to Topeka, or however you want to do it." And I said, "I'm here in Kansas, by the way." And so I said, "Sure, I'll do state senate. I don't care." And I had ran for city council prior to that as a joke because
Right.
the guy, the guy that was on the ballot didn't have anybody running against him. So I thought he at least had to have an opponent. So I just paid the $128, and that was a city thing, and I didn't really think anything about it. I was kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing, and I put the Wichita flag on my little palm card, and I went to the speeches, and I said, "Hey, no taxes, no property taxes, no taxes on food, no taxes on gasoline," and people were just they were like, "I like this guy."
Yeah, this is great. He's a good guy.
And I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't know what it really meant. I mean, I knew what I wanted, but I didn't know what
Right.
it took, right? So I just was saying those things because I knew that I didn't want to pay property tax. I didn't want to pay food tax. I didn't want
Right.
to pay tax on my gasoline. And so anyway, so people were really enjoying it. And I obviously got lost that election. I just wanted the guy to be primaried and have to struggle, right?
Right.
And at least show that he cares. And so then, like I said, my buddy says, "Hey, run for state senate." So I go down and I apply, and I just $128 later, I'm on the ballot. I win the primary,
Wow.
and so I'm going into the general election, and a lot of things are going well, and even got an endorsement from the railway workers union. So I had different endorsements from the Reagan group that's here in town. There's all these different things, and
Mhm.
things were going good. And then we're going to kind of compress the story real quick to how you said, "How did you get here, Jim?"
Right.
How I got here was they knock warranted my house. They swatted my house. They brought SWAT team in my house, but not SWAT team, but SWAT team, not the official SWAT team, not the official people who actually do this for a living every single day, but a group of officers that aren't able to testify in open court. Now, I learned all this after the fact. While I was living through it, I was like, what in the world is going on? But everybody that was brought into my house is not allowed or not able to testify in open court because they have perjured themselves, even though they still are on the police force, even though they still have a pension, even though they still can arrest you and charge you with crimes. They do not have the credibility of the courts to be able to testify in open court. So 15 police officers rush into my house as I've got my hand up on my head. and they got the red dot in there. You move, I'll blow your effing head off. And I'm like 4 feet away from the guy. I'm standing right because I opened the door for him.
Yeah. Are you that bad of a shot, dude?
I was like, and so then one guy goes, man, I wish you'd have grabbed for that gun by the door. It was a BB gun. I was getting those, little grackles, those little birds that do that. They eat all your bird feed and they just, and they crap all over everything. Well, anyway, my bird feeder, for some reason, I just kept getting these birds and they were just piling the bird feed out of my thing. So I would take this BB gun. It was a kid's BB gun, very low powered, single pump. It was more of the,
right.
to get them off of it. It never hurt any birds, AWECP or whatever it is, McLaughlin, people.
NRA, no,
it hurt a bird, okay? And most of the time it missed. It was just more of my satisfaction. But the cop said, I wish you'd have grabbed for the gun. I'm like, wow, like you just said that? And so this is all on chest camera, on body camera. It's all out there. And anyway, so I went through all these things and then I go, this was on my birthday. And so I spent the entire 6 hours in my driveway handcuffed. ATF came out. ATF says the guy can own guns as many as he wants. Well, there's pot in the house. Well, okay, where'd you find it? Well, we found it downstairs. Okay, how much did you find? Oh, and then like, this is not a crime. I'm not here for this. I'm not here. You guys have a law. And he goes, by the way, your guys' own ordinance says that this is a misdemeanor and it's a ticket. The ATF was schooling the police department on what their own laws were. And so anyway, and then as it progressed, I didn't get released until the next morning at 12:30 in the morning after my birthday. Even though I was bailed out, I had already called my attorney and my bail was already waiting for me before I ever left my house.
Unbelievable.
Bondsman was there. And so, so this all happened in real time. And so, guys, the reason that I tell you the story is not because I'm looking for sympathy, but I'm looking to tell you something that, listen, you have a machine and a government that honestly doesn't care about whether they drain your bank account, whether they ruin your reputation, as long as they maintain that power and they maintain that fear factor inside of you. So you will not react. So you will not, you will always comply to put your mask on. So you'll go take that government chemical, whatever it is. The sad part of it is that you have to have discernment in your heart and know that not everybody on the thin blue line is a good individual. Not every person that is a DA is a good person. Right. Not everybody who puts that black robe on and is a British accredited registered lawyer means that they're good people. Even though I paid a lot of zeros, I could have bought a couple different houses for the amount of money that I paid my attorneys. I still ended up being taken down. I ended up being charged with a felony for something I never did. And the judge changed the plea bargain at the court trial from a paraphernalia misdemeanor to a felony. And I'm telling you guys right now, I've lived through it. I've had my challenges, but I want you to understand where your authority is. And one of the things I preach about, I was in Michigan, Detroit, Michigan, the weekend before I was with you last week. I was at the Jim Caviezel and Tim Bennett event there. And then this last weekend, I was with Juan O'Savin and Scott Bennett and Lloyd Brunson. We were on stage speaking together in a panel. I led the panel asking the questions. So guys, I'm out here telling, and in my panel, I said, listen, the Constitution limits you, but never limits the Constitution. The Constitution never.
God bless you.
I don't have to sneeze, right? So the Constitution limits the government, but never limits you. And I talk about how you have God-given inalienable rights. God gave you these rights that can be never given or never taken away. Right. And men do not give you power, but God gives you the power. And so the reason I preach that is because if you don't know you've never read your Constitution, if you've honestly never read your Constitution, then you don't know the owner's manual to the country you live in. And so why would you ever think you'll find justice? Why do you think you'll ever find peace? Why do you ever think you'll find freedom? Why do you think these people will never listen to you? Because you don't even know that you live in a constitutional republic, not a democracy. Democracy says elected leadership. Constitutional republic says elected servants. And the word servant means that they are complied to you. They do what you want, and they have more constitutional rights than you. So that's, in a nutshell, is why I'm here. That's why I started the radio show back in 2018, 2019. It was a Saturday evening show. I liked going in. I was cathartic. I got to talk about the things. I got to talk about AOC and how stupid she was. But then things really took off from there. And like you said, what you did, you were doing a little, hey, I'm going to do some conservatism. But then I found out that the Corporation of America, created in 1871, means that you're nothing but chattel as a corporate entity, and you do not have any specific rights because they own you as a corporation, as an asset. So you find that out, and then you're like, what are you talking about, Jimmy? I don't understand. And it gets worse. And so, like you said, it's the right and left wing of the same bird. These people want to act like they're giving you a choice, but in reality, it's all fictitious. They are selected, but never elected. And we have to be mindful of that. So that's why I keep ringing the bell. I keep telling you the bird's out, because I've had my life toilet flushed. I lost all my valuables, everything to be able to defend myself. They will liquidate your life to come after you. And really, guys, they're only defending $15 and $18 an hour jobs. The average judicial job averages out about $20 an hour. Most of your security guards average out at $18 an hour. And yet we don't want to talk about how the judicial system is actually just a money machine to give people a job.
And what's unfortunate is that it's really a bureaucracy. It's not even what our founding fathers created with our constitutional republic to basically safeguard our freedoms. Yep. Now you got these bureaucracies, and it's I like that you made the point that's $15, $20 an hour jobs, because it's more about the power than it is the money. They get in, they've got a month vacation, they got, a month sick leave, they got, and I might be, off a little bit, but they got all these benefits, and they get to have the power and the title to go in and out of government buildings. They get to feel a little bit powerful.
Cool Kids Club. They get to be in the cool kids club, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what's really bad for us is to create their rules or regulations, to make their decisions that become law. They make the decision, and it becomes law. They get to make a decision in a case or a trial against somebody, and all the judges after them go, well, we don't want to overturn that judge's law out of respect. We're going to honor how he ruled.
Well, that guy said it, so I'm going to repeat it. Well, that guy
exactly
said it, I'm going to repeat it. Yeah.
It becomes precedence, and then the laws and regulations that they get to create without going through our Constitution. Yeah. They get to circumvent our Congress by doing so. So bureaucracy gains more power. And then when something like this happens to you, where you get unjustly, accused, now that power can be used to not only be vengeful against you, but it's what's being used to take away freedoms from everybody.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of interviews lately with, we have a lot of our military that's locked up.
Right.
I think I've told you about this before, where there's a lot of military personnel that are locked up for things they did in wartime.
Yeah.
Now, when you listen to some of them, some of the stories, you go, okay, that's not that great. Right. When you listen to most of them, you go, wait a minute, why are they getting locked up for that? Well, the reality is they're put into a wartime situation, and in years past, they've always been pardoned. But now they're getting locked up for small things.
Well, let me ask you a question. Are we actually at war? See, that's how the caveat probably works in most of those situations, is that if we're not in a declaration of war, then in reality, there can be no pardons, because we were never under a congressional war order. So if we're in there being peacekeepers, then we're policemen, and policemen have different ethics than military men in the times of war. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, it makes perfect sense, because when you listen to these guys, you hear that fine line. But then when I first heard about the January 6ers, right, in the weeks and months afterwards, you go, oh, well, these guys broke into the Capitol. That's a bad thing. Right. But then as it's come out and you hear the facts, you hear how these guys were lured in. We've heard all the stories. You watch the videos, Tucker Carlson, where they're being shown around. And then you hear how their Fourth Amendment rights are being violated, but they're not getting due process. And you hear about the guy that's locked up in a closet, and then they move them around. They move them around regularly. So that way, if they do get a sentence, that what they've served doesn't get counted as time served. And you hear these things, then you hear how our government is finding yet another way to remove our freedoms and liberties. Right. And then I interviewed an attorney a couple of times. I have to give you her name and number,
Yeah.
where when I first heard about her, she said, her shtick. Well, I'm making a long story short, where she says she basically gets freedoms back to criminals. And
Right.
when I found out that she was giving gun rights back to criminals and fighting for them and had ways of doing that, at first the right wing conservative follow the narrative part of me that's in the past now
Right.
says, well, you're supposed to lock up all the criminals. That's the way to fight crime, right?
Yeah.
But then when you hear her stories, how she talks about the 18-year-old client of hers who was selling a joint in his stepfather's house, and somehow or another the police got tipped off. He's in his stepfather's house.
Right.
The police come raid the house. The stepfather's got a gun in the back of the house the kid doesn't know about. Now the kid gets sentenced to 3 years in jail because of a gun crime and selling a joint. He gets out at 21 years old. He now faces civil death.
Yep.
He's a felon. He can't vote. He can't defend himself. And all because the government overreached in that case. So
Well,
now,
let me point out something real quick, folks.
Sure.
I want you guys to understand the Second Amendment does not say barrel length. It does not say the circumference of the barrel. It doesn't say how many freedom fries going to come out of it at what rate. It does not say whether you're a felon or a citizen or a what would you call it? A participant in society. It doesn't matter. It says it is your right, and the government is limited by that. And if you don't understand that a well-regulated militia is a well-practiced people's army, you don't know your authority. Every single thing in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution limits the government because they understood what true tyranny was, because they lived under the only superpower known to man at that time, which was England. And yet everybody wants to think about it just, hey, we just said we cut ties. No, we had to fight these guys. So don't act like it's nothing.
And what's interesting is, and I'm not going to explain it the right way, but you'll get the gist of it. Yeah. She also explains that there's a precedence when you look at precedents, when you look at what are the years before our Constitution, how were people judged before our Constitution? And to your point, Jim, there's nothing in our before our Constitution where you are not, if you committed some sort of a crime and you're in the area or the providence, that you could not own a weapon, could not own a gun. And so when you start
hearing some of the old Westerns, literally when they get out of jail, they hand them their gun.
Right.
Like when they get out of prison, they're like, oh, you served your 12 years. Here's your gun.
Right.
Like they literally give them their gun. See, this is the problem, is that they've mind manipulated us to believe that somehow gun rights can be marginalized through background checks and red flag laws and age limits and barrel limits and all this other stuff. It says, don't touch the fringe. Don't touch the very edge of the paper, much less look at the words. Don't infringe. Don't come to the edge.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's where we gave in, right? Just like we gave in on abortion. Oh, well, you can have an abortion up to, let's do heartbeat. Let's do first trimester. And so then all of a sudden now it's full term and 28 days later. You guys know in California they're allowing that, right?
It won't be long in California before they say, well, they're not really, until they're 18 years old, they're not really a person.
No, that's absolutely real. No, that's already coming down the pipe. You didn't know about that? That's real.
No, I didn't know about this.
Yes. They're actually talking about now that the viability of the child is actually being put in question. In other words, if they don't think you're going to be a good part of society when you grow up, and they're executing homeless people and elderly people through euthanasia in Canada, because that is actually now a law there.
I know euthanasia is legal in Canada now. Yeah. But see, these are all the things, and this is a great segue into one of my next questions for you, Jim. It used to be when I would go to some of these summits, as my show expanded and I went to these summits and conferences, I'd hear all these little factoids. I'd hear all these little facts and things, and I'd go, oh, that's that crazy talk. That's that conspiracy talk. Yeah. And then you go back and, a month later, it's in the news. I mean, I remember when, it was conspiracy to believe they're spraying stuff in the air to control things. And now now you're hearing them leak out this. It's like aliens, by the way.
We're not, before we were denying it, but now that you know about it, it's for your own good. We're spraying for your own, we're doing it for weather. That way we can control the climate. We can, we can mitigate the effects of human beings on Earth. Guys, we live in an ice age right now. Because there is ice on the north and southern poles of our globe, we are actually considered to be in an ice age. So honestly, we are in a cooling period right now, and people don't realize that actually. Let me show you how I can disprove climate any way you want to. Now, when you said, let's say you say it's hot today, right? You go outside, you're in Louisiana, I'm in Kansas, it's 104 today, and you go,
it's hot. It's hot.
But we have a digital thermometer that's supposedly calibrated by some, I don't know what standard, and some dude with a weights and measures somehow figured out how to do a digital scale that they know that has to be out of the sun and out of the wind to make sure it's getting the right ambient temperature to not to be affected by any alternate forces, right?
Right.
But yet 100 years ago in Louisiana, in the parish you live in, it was 105 today in 1903 and blah, 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 blah. Let me ask you a quick question. What technology were we using in 1903? We were using mercury thermometers on a piece of board that was nailed on it with pieces of metal.
Right.
How are you telling me that Junior went out there and looked at it at exactly the right time? You know, when you're looking at that mercury thermometer, you gotta where it's at. How does he know?
Is that my eyes?
How does he know what the hottest part of the day was? What if he was sleeping? What if he had man, what if he was harvesting? What if he had something else better to do besides writing down how hot it got that day? Seriously. There was a person in your town, in your parish, where they tell you, oh, in parish, it got to 103 in 1908. How do you know? How do you know? Are you sure you know? Because we really can't get it right here. I mean, how many times? 80% of the time forecasters are wrong and yet they keep their job. I mean, I couldn't know if
is that hilarious? You know, you'll hear and then they want to focus in on it. It's gonna rain. It's gonna rain Thursday. It's a rain Thursday. It's a rain Thursday. It's gonna be a big rain. It's gonna be a little rain. It's gonna be a lot of rain. And then Thursday comes along and doesn't even rain.
Right.
It goes back to some of the things that we hear about in the news that were conspiracy a while back. But to your point, when you hear it on a daily basis, it's okay.
Right.
You know, the weatherman was wrong because he was just wrong. But you know, thermometers back then, today, you know, my car will tell me it's 105, but I look on my app and the app says it's going to be, it's 100, but then I listen to the news and somebody's, the heat index, you know, it was 115.
Heat index in there. Now it feels like 115. No, dumbass. How hot was it? And don't give me that, well, with the relative humidity and all the other stuff in there.
And with global warming, you never know what the temperature is.
They're all full of it. Here's the problem, Billy. This is me and your problem. You're a man of age. I'm a man of age. We like our air conditioning, right? I'm sitting here at 72 degrees in my house and it's 104 outside. Well, if I leave 72-degree weather in my house and I go outside of this little portal called a door and I go outside and it's 104, okay, that is a 30-degree swing.
Right.
It's going to feel hot.
It's going to feel really hot.
Yeah, it's like, guys, think about how stupid you sound. Okay, during the winter, it's 70 degrees or 72 degrees in your house, and you walk outside and it's 0. That's a 70-degree swing. Oh my gosh, it's so cold out here. We're all gonna die. Hey, dummy, you're normalized to 72 degrees. Winter, summer, spring, fall.
That's right.
That's why they seem so significant to you, is because they vary from the climate that you have grown accustomed to.
That's right.
Anyway, sorry. I mean,
I love it. But but to your point, you know, it's like if you had this conversation 50 years ago, people would go, yeah, the weather's changing. It gets hot. But because the narratives and the media perpetuates, and the like I said, the narratives of global warming, we now panic and get a little bit more extreme about it. Like, I remember when it was hot when 20, 30 years ago, people said, oh, it's hot. Now they cry about it for an hour. Everybody talks about it. You have a 30-minute conversation about it. And then everybody blames it on global warming and goes home.
When I was in junior high, Rose Hill Middle School, I was in middle school. We called it middle school here in Kansas, but Rose Hill Junior High, middle school. I remember at football practice, I could put my hand down in the cracks of the dirt because in September, when we're having football practice, it was so dry. You could put your hand down there. And I used to put my foot in those cracks. You know, we get down and we do defensive drills and stuff. You get down, I put my foot in the cracks so I can hit a little more leverage. That's
Right.
how big the cracks were. But yet we're all running around going, oh, it's so hot. I don't understand it. It's like it's hot every summer. You ding dong, like don't get that way. But we run around with our head on fire. Oh, we're all gonna die.
Because that's what the narratives and the constant barrage of news stories does to you.
Mhm.
And Jim, you're making an excellent point. We're using the weather to make the example, but this can be applied to everything that's going on in our country.
Yeah.
When if when they want to make Trump look like he's done a lot of things, or bad things, are able to use the narratives, the J6ers,
Mhm.
and whether people agree or disagree, the narratives that they have put out and constantly attacked us with,
Yep.
and forced us to listen to, because no matter where you go, you're seeing these news stories. It makes it just like the weather.
Yep.
It makes it 10 times worse when it's always that disparity between what your gut feeling is telling you is the truth
Right.
and what they're telling you is the truth. And that disparity, like you made the analogy of with the weather, going through that little time portal
Yeah.
called the front door, it's that big difference that you go, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it really is bad.
We're gonna
But when
die.
the reality is, if you go back in the way back machine, and you look at how you felt before the constant barrage of narratives and media, you were thought about it with your heart and your mind and your conscience,
Right.
and you're a little bit more, how shall we say, a little bit more commonsensical
Right.
about things and
Well,
less controlled.
back in the 90s, I was running a framing crew. I was a foreman at 21. I was running a framing crew in Phoenix, Arizona. We framed a house a week. Every single week, every 5 days, we're building a new house. We're framing a new house, moving to the next house. Boom, boom, boom. And I remember we were in this house. It was over by Superstition Springs Mall in Mesa, Arizona, out east of the valley there. And I remember I was throwing plywood on the roof because we had to get the plywood off the ground, because that was one of the rules of the company. When you get plywood delivered, it has to get up on the roof because people like to steal it. And so that's what we did. The plywood got dumped that day. We had rolled the trusses. Hurry up, guys. I got to get the plywood up here. And so we're tossing the plywood up. And I'm like, man, it's hot today. Woo. I'm pulling the plywood up, throwing it on the stack, throwing it up, and we're just going, right? And I'm like, all right, guys, let's get this going. We got to get out of here. As soon as we're done, let's just get out of here for today. And I didn't even know what was really going on. The radio was on, but we don't really listen. It's in the background. Saws are going,
Right.
was going. And I get home and, I take my shower, and we usually got off. I think it was like 2:30 at that time, because we started when the sun came up because it was hot.
Right.
And got home and took my shower, and then the 5 o'clock news comes on, because that's what we all do, right? We turn the 5 o'clock news on.
Right.
Yeah, well, so and so.
Before there were narratives.
Yeah, they got the shooting here. We got this. The stock market did that. Beans are down. Work bellies are up. And then here comes the news. Oh, Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport shut down because the air was too thin for jets to take off. And I was like, could anybody have told me that while I was at work? So you're shutting down the airport, but I'm still throwing plywood on the top of a roof in Phoenix, Arizona. And what I'm saying to that is, yeah, it was hot that day. I had a t-shirt on, had my sunglasses on, a pair of shorts, and I'm throwing plywood. I noticed it was hot, but I didn't stop working. I didn't stop living. I kept living
Right.
my life. And it just was hot. And you're not going to die.
Right.
You're probably going to die of cold before you die of hot, by the way, guys.
Right.
That's another thing too, is you can live through a lot more hot than you can cold. So just I narrative. Right.
Jim, you made another great point. You keep on living, regardless of all these narratives that we keep hearing, that we're allowing to be ourselves to be controlled
Right.
with the narratives that we're hearing. If everybody thought with their brains instead of the narratives, and kept on living a positive life and be more involved,
Mhm.
then we would be able to be happier and be more productive, and we would not be as controlled by politics.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I mentioned about aliens a minute ago, and I always laugh about that because 30 years ago that was a conspiracy.
Right.
There were now they're dripping it out, and they pull out the aliens at the same time hunters getting that nobody can find the cocaine.
Yeah,
Who brought the cocaine to the party this time? It was Hunter's turn. But everybody's
they all brought the cocaine. I don't think it's just Hunter. I think Hunter is the shiny object, But as much as there's a lot of drugs in that whole situation. So I don't think it's Hunter specifically. He probably was participating, but he may even been the one that brought it there. But I guarantee you, let's do a piss test on the entire White House staff and find out who's really doing what, or do a hair follicle test, right?
That actually might be what's going on with the president. But that being said, what other narratives do you think are ones that we need to be more aware of, that were narratives, or there were maybe narratives, or maybe they were conspiracy at one time, but we're really hearing more about now? We're hearing, like what happened in Hawaii, for instance. I mean, weeks ago, you would think it's a conspiracy to think that it was intentional. But when you hear what's coming out now, not in the mainstream news, you're hearing more and more about, wait a minute, all the different things that just make the pieces not fit. What other conspiracies that do you think have been debunked that are now more mainstream that we're hearing about?
Well, let me give you something that may not sound like I'm starting off on the right path. Where does the very first speech suppression come from in the world? It comes from the pulpit. The pulpit said at a time that there was certain words you cannot use, because the king at the time didn't like people saying bad things about him. So the church and the crown started using conspiracy between the two of them to conspire against the people, to say, hey, there's a list of words, list of things you cannot say. But for me, I would say that we are now realizing where our true history is. We're starting to find out what the true facts about what we really are and how powerful we really are. And I think that one of the things that we've always forgotten is that we are the people, we are the power. And I think that people are starting to see, because they keep hearing that word democracy. Why does Nancy Pelosi want a democracy? Well, if she wants a democracy and she hates Uncle Pooty, Vladimir Putin, well, I love republic, being a constitutional republic, and I love Mr. Pooty. I mean, he's my buddy now, because they tell me through their own language that they want a democracy and the Russia's the problem. Well, I want a republic and Putin is my buddy. So there's a lot of things out there about the world around us that we really have to see, that they're telling us the truth. But so many times we got caught up in the shiny object of fighting with each other, right wing, left wing, all this other stuff. I think, guys, you have to go back to your history and understand that you're going to have to rewrite your mental history of who really won the Second World War, what really started the First World War, why we actually had a situation where Lincoln was not the president we thought he was when he told the southern states that they will listen to him, giving us the federalist model we live in now, where individual state rights supersede the federal government. I think, guys, when you start going back and really studying your history and being a true steward of history, I think you're going to find out that it's actually more fascinating, but it's actually full of more lies than you believe. And I want to go one more analogy with that. I do believe they wrote the history books. By the way, the Rockefeller Institute, the Mellon Institute, all these different people who were a part of the Federal Reserve Act, they're the ones that started rewriting and writing history. And I do believe they wrote it in such a way that only certain people really found it fascinating, which they tend to be the people who cannot communicate it well. They tend to be the dullards. How many history classes have you taken back when you were in high school? You just like, oh God, take me now. There's any place on earth I don't want to be, is history class, right? Because they made it so doldrum. But what if they wrote it in such a way that it was almost nonsensical, so you could barely understand it or barely remember it? But then also they made it to where it was so dull that you didn't want to, right? You're just like, this is nonsensical to me. I don't want to read stuff. Well, what if in reality that's what they were doing through MK Ultra and Paperclip and other things that we know that have been declassified CIA operations, including Looking Glass and others? Guys, if you start really learning your history, you will find out that there's a lot more to fight for here than just some rights, some gun rights and other things. It's actually fighting for human history and the history of humans coming and generations to be.
I always speak it in terms of freedom and liberty, and our God-given rights, and then our Constitution protects those God-given rights. Right. I love how you're applying that philosophy that I have to the actual timestamps of history and events that have happened in our country that correlate to that. That's an excellent thought, Jim. I appreciate that, and I'm going to use it in some future shows. But when you think about it like that, you realize that's what history really jumps out at you, and how the course of human events, prove not only what you're saying, but prove that there's other things that we have to think about. Like I'll give you one example, one or two examples of what I learned. A lot of people and I'm not going to go deep on this, but a lot of people wonder why there was so much hatred towards the Indians, not just because they were killing each other at going back in
They
history.
were horrible to each other, by the
They're
way.
horrible at each other. But a lot of people, what I found in some history books, deep in history, because I myself like to be a good steward of history.
Mhm.
And when you read back in there, the British actually used the Indians to fight with them against the Americans in the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
when
let me give you something real quick. Did you know that the Redskins is actually a reference to the Nordic whites that were from Sweden and Dutch and all that, that because their skin would burn during the summer months, they were Redskins. And so for people to call Indians Redskins is actually another lie about our history, no different than the Yankees or Yankees is actually a derogatory term towards men that were called Yang or Dutchmen that were there in the northern New York area. And so they called them Yankees as a derogatory. So Yankee is a derogatory term towards Dutch and the Swedish. And also to be called a redskin is actually a Norwegian term because your skin gets red in the summer. So
And meanwhile,
history.
the Indians are now suing to get the name Redskins put back on the Washington football team.
Because the guy, actually, the Redskins, actually, the guy who they named it after was an Indian.
Right.
Washington Redskins was an Indian that actually participated in the club and was this really neat guy and this whole thing. But we misused the term like Yankee or Yankee, the New York Yankees, is a derogatory term towards white people. But anyway.
see, you're making another great point, Jim. Where if we ignore the narratives that they have put on to historic events in history, when we ignore the labels, they said, well, that was really about this or that was about that. How they hijack history going way back hundreds of years and recreating it in the history books, like you talked about. When we say, you know what? It's possible that there's other things. And when you learn that, you might today apply it to today and go, daggone, why don't we just learn to get along a little bit better and not let the far right and the far left keep dividing us up on all this stuff when we know that there's more to it than what we realize?
Well, there's the 13 bloodlines, and there's the gray pope, the white pope, and the black pope. And if you guys actually start looking into that information and start understanding who really makes these high-level decisions, and then the bunch of dummies just follow them wildly. Oh, yeah, let's get some government chemical in my body. It'll fix me.
Right.
That's the useful idiots. And those are the ones that we find that do tend to move the court of public opinion. And we know that they can be, look at the mask wearers. Look at all these low-level thinkers that were out there telling you to wear a mask or go get a government chemical in your arm. But yet now they're going the other way. They're like, oh, I never said that. Like, yeah, don't lie to me now, buddy.
Right. Yeah.
So this is our time that we stand up, we know our power, and don't let these people push us around.
And the best part about it is we don't have to bring pitchforks. We don't have to say we have the Second Amendment. We have that right. All we have to do is show up.
Yeah.
We have to show up at our town halls in large numbers. Yep. Show up when they want a tax increase or they want to, create a new code for a code that you gotta, file a permit to paint your house, or like now where I live, you gotta pay a $50 fee if you want to get a new roof. You gotta pay an extra fee. Like we live not only where they gotta replace every roof every year for a hurricane, but now you got to pay an extra $50 to be able to have the right to get it changed. When they create all these different ordinances, show up in such large numbers to the courthouse that it's undeniable. When Congress is passing laws and legislation, peacefully protest, bombard them with emails, bombard them with phone calls. When you do that, they believe it or not, they hear us. And then to my friends that say elections don't matter because, if they're rigged or whatever, I say, you know what? You still go vote, because what happens is the guys that are counting the votes, whether it's legitimate or not, they know what they can get away with. Because if they're trying to get something passed and they know that 85% of the people are against it, they might not push it as hard because they know more people are against it than not.
Yeah.
So I tell people to show up.
Well, if you send one letter, they think of that equates to about 1,000 to 10,000 people, depending on the district you live in. So if you
Right.
think about sending one email or one letter or one person shows up, they know that there's something up. And if you start showing up to these city council meetings, if you overwhelm the school board meetings, if you overwhelm the county commission meetings, if you overwhelm those people, you're going to get what you want. You will
That's right.
them to death because these are low level thinkers. These are not powerful leaders who can stand on their principles. They can be
That's
easily
right.
pushed around and to believe that government chemicals save their lives. So if they believe that, think about how terrifying you can be with facts.
That's right.
Yeah.
I know you got to go in a minute here because I told you 45 minutes and we're going over it longer.
Yeah.
But that's how I am. That's how I roll.
It's all right.
But talk about getting involved. I want to inform everybody now because this will be a podcast. It's going to be replayed later. How can more people, in your opinion, get involved? I'm gonna feed you the answer a little bit, but I want you to expound upon it.
Right.
We always go. You and I always get to go to a lot of these events.
Right.
We just came back from Mike Lindell's, summit, which look, even if you don't like, for those people that's, oh, I can't believe the Mike Lindell. I'm like, look, even if you don't like him, he brings together a lot of like-minded people with good ideas.
Right.
You went to a summit, to a function before and afterwards. You're going to the Clay Clark event. I've been to CPACs. We've been to CPACs.
Yeah.
There's going to be another in November, which I'm going to tell you about later. I think that if more people showed up at these events, but I want to ask you, how strongly would you support that? And do you think that's a good route? How can more people get involved in those events?
Well, a couple of, give you a bit of the schedule I'm going through here. I was with Jim Caviezel and Tim Bennett, is that right? Tim Bennett? No, Tim Barnett, up in Detroit, Michigan, the last weekend. Then we were in Springfield together. Then I was in Chicago this last weekend, and there's another human trafficking event with Lloyd Brunson, Scott Bennett, and also Juan O'Savin. I was on stage with them, and I'm out there introducing and meeting these people and talking to these people daily. But I will tell you right now, I don't care how many famous people you think I've met, from General Flynn and all that. I've done all these things. Guys, if you do not, first, open your mouth, then you haven't even begun to take the easiest step. The second one is to not stop saying whatever is coming to your mind about freedom and liberty, because the more that comes out of your mouth, the more it resonates in the area around you. Your future will get better. It will be more bright. It will be more free. But then if you can't seem to get enough out, and you feel like you can't articulate in the right way, find a small group. Find a local Republican group. And a lot here, you are going to find a more like-minded person in a Republican group than you will a Democrat group, just because you want freedoms. Okay, we'll just default to that.
Right.
At the same time, if you really want to get involved, find a small group, find a church group. All you got to do is go on Google and say, if you're in Louisiana or you're in Wichita, Kansas, put in Republican Wichita or Republican group or something like that in your little search bar. And all of a sudden, Facebook will give you all these clubs, all these organizations in your area. And then just go to a meeting, attend, get with like-minded people.
Right.
Never stop talking. No one's handing out big buckets of freedom. No one is handing out big buckets of freedom. When they say no one's coming to save you, that's what that means.
Right.
You have to fight for your freedom at your level, the best way you know how. And if that means giving money to the Jim Price Show or giving money to William here and saying, hey, I want you at more of these events.
That's right.
That's your voice being moved forward. And
exactly right.
Donate and say, hey, I'm going to buy you a tank of gas, or I'm going to buy your hotel, or I'm going to make sure you got tires in the truck. That's how you move the needle. But if you sit there on your thumbs and you're all quiet, you never say nothing, your silence is compliance, which means that you are complicit in the crime that is executing and killing people across our globe with your tax dollars. So if you want to be that person, then you shouldn't be watching this show and go back to sleep, because I don't want you on my team. But the rest of you that want to get involved, want to get in the fight, start donating, start showing up, start buying tickets, donate tickets, be the difference makers. Because you know what?
Right.
If you don't have this country, I don't care if you got $1 billion in your bank account. If this country fails, you got nothing.
That's right.
Think about that. So you either put your money where your mouth is or shut up and don't complain, because I don't want to hear it when I'm out there fighting and you're back there going, well, I don't know why you don't do more, Jim. Ain't my job. It's everybody's job. Your job, my job. We all got to get involved. So be the difference maker, people. I'm not lecturing you. I'm excited because I believe the power belongs inside of you. And if you just understood, you limit yourself. You limit yourself. No one limits you. You build these imaginary cages. You build these imaginary walls. You don't have to. Be the difference makers. Be the people out there that are going out and making this world a better place.
Jim, I'm honored to know you.
Yeah.
I'm honored to call you a friend. I'm grateful to be able to communicate with you.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you what, I think more people that follow you, go on your platform, see what you have to say. You know, you're inspiring, and we all work together to inspire people. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
You guys.
Well, look, I'll let you go,
Right.
and then we'll wrap up the broadcast. People will be able to hear this on a podcast. They'll be able to watch it on Rumble. They'll be able to watch it on YouTube. I'll send out the links.
Good.
Jim, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you.
You bet, man. Thank you
Have a
guys.
great night.
You bet. Bye-bye.